Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm swell. How you doing, Bob?
I'm doing good. Welcome back. Welcome back to all our viewers. Welcome to 2024. This is our first SquadCast of the year. Things are going well despite the torrential rain that's outside of my door or window. I'm
It's
in the
it's
basement, so
just
it's
it
really
just
upstairs.
started here.
It's been bad all day down here.
Yeah,
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm 1,000 years old and I can't move, but parts of my brain still work, so I'm not complaining.
Good. Good to hear it. Um, we we haven't talked in a while, so I want to get into some of the things that may have happened between now and then. I also
hmm
want to take a minute at the front of this uh, to put in the comments here a link to our new newsletter. Um, One of the things that we've done at the beginning of the year is kind of establish a newsletter. So if you go ahead and subscribe on our page, it'll set you up to be on our mailing list. And then on a weekly basis, we're going to send you a recap of what goes on Pop Culture Squad. It'll let you know who's going to be on the show the upcoming week. It'll give you a link to the previous show, as well as all of our columns, Mike's columns, my columns, Ed's columns, anybody else who comes onto the show. So one of the things
Probably
we're
even Mark's columns, I would think.
Mark's columns too. Anybody else on anything. We'll also like throw in some other stuff about what's going on. So we encourage everybody to do that. We encourage everybody to subscribe to this. We encourage that if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're watching this on Facebook, go ahead and subscribe or like it so that you'll know when we go live. We have a pretty heavy list of guests that we're going to hopefully have on this year that I've already started reaching out to. I'm not 100% sure about next week because it's still kind of beginning of the year, but it's going to be a good list. Also, part of the reason that I did this, Mike, is Twitter is unuseful anymore.
Yes.
It was a place where people would find out about our site and see our site and go and read articles, and there was some content that was generated from that. Now it's not. Number one, our hosting site, our hosting platform doesn't work with Twitter anymore because Twitter stopped supporting it. Because they just don't want to do anything. There's no coding left at this coding company.
Don't get me started about their owner, because I
Right.
can blow the 2 hours just on that.
Well,
It'll be
there's
fun.
that. Yeah, there's that, and we're available on all of the social media platforms. You can get the link to the newsletter. There's all of our links there, so go ahead and sign up wherever you like to see us. And we're trying really hard to make sure that we get to everywhere, but it's always a challenge because there's so many different platforms and not everything is automatically generated. So if we miss something or if you miss something, read the newsletter and it'll give you links and catch you up on what's going on in the world. Do we want to talk about Aquaman?
No, I want
Do
to
you
talk
want to
about for a second.
what?
I think we should run a contest in
A
your
contest?
newsletter.
I think we should run
Yeah,
a contest.
I have
What are
no
we gonna
idea
do?
what. Maybe we should have a contest about what sort of contest we should run.
I think we
But
should do that.
but I would like to have a contest. I have no idea why. It just popped up in my head and said,
No, I
"Oh,
think it's a great idea. I think we should. I think we can definitely have a contest or two. I think we're going to do that, and we'll probably include it in the newsletter, and that way, people who can actually get it, we're getting there. We got a couple dozen people on the list right now, so we're excited about that. Um, I do want to ask you. So we're not going to talk about Aquaman, which is fine. You were mentioning to me What If, that you've been watching What If.
yes, I really enjoyed this season."
So what about it is the thing that's attractive to you about it?
Well, there's a couple of things. The most attractive thing is strictly fanboy.
Mhm.
They get the what if concept. They've translated it quite nicely to the 21st century and to television and to, sort of a 9-issue story or overarching story. This season I liked Oh, and also I love the fact that whenever possible, which is most of the time, they use the TV and movie actors.
Sure, that's cool.
That is great. I mean, that's just when Stanley Tucci showed up in a 5-second role, reprising his role in Captain America, I went nuts. I thought that was just brilliant. But all this season they've been working on, giving us characters that we know of, but we haven't seen much of. So they've fleshed out some characters. And of course, the main reason why I like the show first season and this season is that I'm just an Agent Carter fan. So, and it really is, the Agent Carter show. And they're doing wonderful work with the character. So, I mean, it's 25 minutes out of my life. This time it was kind of fun because it was every night. I know a lot of people just binged it, but we watched it like in 2-episode jaunts.
That's cool. That's good. And Echo launches today, I think. I haven't watched it.
Yes, it's up today. I'm going to be watching it shortly after we're done here.
So one of the interesting things that we are in this world of is there are so many things that are available for people to consume media-wise that are just nerdy. Like, it wouldn't have happened, would never have happened. Like, we got excited about things like Automan and Manimal in terms of sci-fi weird TV shows. Like, Misfits of Science was like the jam. And now we get like things like this, that, and we're in a great time. Like right now, Marvel is, working on where they're going to be. Some people are complaining about it. I don't understand it.
Because the internet brings out the worst in people.
Sure. But it's fun. It's exciting. It's interesting. Aquaman was difficult for me to watch. So thankfully that
I haven't seen it.
Well, don't.
Well, that's what I'm told. I kind of like the first one. I wasn't that big a fan of it. I mean, whenever people say, well, for a DC movie, well, yeah, okay. That's a low bar, man.
I mean, it was the first movie. It wasn't good. It was entertaining. It was ridiculously entertaining. The funny part is, I was watching Aquaman. I said to myself, they just should have cast Patrick Wilson as Aquaman from the beginning. Because the thing about it is that we're done talking about this. One thing is that Jason Momoa is no Aquaman anybody's ever seen until Jason Momoa became Aquaman.
Right.
So that's fine. You just call him somebody else. Don't call him Aquaman, because everybody has impressions and ideas of what Aquaman should be like, and he's none of them.
He's only been around since 1941. What do people want?
Yeah. So, but that genre, or that epoch of DC movies and content is over. We now are in the James Gunn era and going forward. So hopefully it'll get better, and we're excited about it.
What I'm concerned about has nothing to do with James Gunn, who I respect. I love his movies. I love his work. He respects the comics medium, and you can see that on the screen in his work. And he treated my buddy Johnny Ostrander just beautifully.
Yes.
So
we'll always love him for that.
Yeah. I mean, he could like kill 16 nuns or something, and I would still say, yeah, but he was nice to John.
That's right.
That's
right.
But the biggest problem they have there is that this whole streaming thing is not working, and they can't figure out how to make money, make everything fit together with all of these other streaming services merging and unmerging and making deals with each other.
Yeah,
And,
did you hear the latest on that?
well, some of the DC content went over to, what was it, Netflix, I think?
Yeah, and then some of the Paramount content went to Hulu, or all of the Star Trek movies
Right.
are all
Yes.
off of Paramount now.
Yeah.
And there was that, but I've heard there's a rumor that Warner Brothers and Paramount are sniffing around each other's.
Well, they had a meeting.
Yeah.
They had a meeting.
What did they say? What happened in the meeting? Tell me.
The meeting happened about 2 weeks ago at Paramount's offices near Times Square in Manhattan. So,
how do you know this? Were you invited?
No, I was not there.
I wouldn't put it past you.
I could be real mysterious about it, but no. It means the Warner Brother people went there to talk with them.
Mm-hmm.
And in that business and doing those types of negotiations, that means something. It's
mm-hmm.
Both of them need each other. I'm not sure that the antitrust folks would approve, but it seems like they don't care about anything anyway, so they probably would. I think that we're 2-3 years away from a decision on that. But I would be shocked if 3 years from now we have all of these separate streaming services that we have today.
Well, I need to fix my bills because it's outrageous now.
And as they remove content from their service without lowering the price, you're wondering why you're paying all that money. I know right.
I am. There's this concept. I had it with a friend of mine who said, I'm going to think about just rotating which service I have and then binge that for a month. And I think that's a great idea, but I do not have time to manage that type of crap.
Right. That's a headache. I mean, I just want to sit down and watch TV. Come on.
Right.
I don't feel that anybody's obligated to keep me entertained. That's my job.
Yep.
But we do need these providers to provide us with entertainment. I've been on the other end of that most of my professional life, and that's a fun job. But now it's like, I don't want the bullshit. I want to sit down and just watch something that I enjoy without feeling like, I'm spending $100 a month on nothing.
Sure. Yeah, that, and I get texts regularly from children saying, "What's the password to this? What's the password to that? What's the password to this?" And then they answer each other in the group text, which is great. So I don't have to get involved. Until I get pissed off and then I change passwords and people are very upset. I want to talk about some comics that are coming out. I think so. One of the things that we're encountering in this world right now in terms of publishers is that some publishers are doing some good things, and I'm not crediting the publisher. I'm crediting the fact that they got lucky and made the right choice to say yes to a project. But Boom has a couple of
always work like that. But I appreciate what you're saying.
I'm oversimplifying. I 100% agree. There are times though when I'm noticing a particular publisher is putting out a bunch of good books at the same time, and I'm really enjoying that. But that doesn't mean that they're actually doing anything great about it. They just happen to be saying yes to the right people at the right time. And that doesn't mean that that's happening here. I'm just saying Boom's got some books coming out that I'm enjoying. This being one of them.
Yep.
And the other one, and I'm going to take a minute. This book came out last week. It's Kyle Starks and Fran Galan. I'm a fan of Fran Galan. He did Tim Seeley's book Roadie last year. I don't know if you saw that. But I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the heck out of that book. This is a little different in tone, It's also
That's a nice cover.
it is. It's pretty much the inside. That's what it looks like. That's the art style. It's a little different for Kyle Starks too. It's sort of not absolutely off the wall crazy. At least the first issue isn't. It's mature but not overly mature. It's kind of a private eye situation that's going to get a little weird, but it's really good. I really enjoyed the first issue, so I'm recommending those two books right now.
Both from Boom.
Both from Boom. That's why I brought it up. Otherwise, these things happen.
Well, no, I mean, that's a company that's been around for a few years and has really shown that they know what they're doing. Now, their background, of course, goes back to Eclipse and all of that, so they have some very experienced professionals. But still, the trick is for a publisher is to get good work, and it doesn't always just come in over the transom, as Dick Giordano used to say. And I'm sure 80% of our viewers right now don't know what a transom is.
I would have loved to hear Dick say that.
Oh, it was wonderful. It was wonderful. But a transom was the ventilation system for most old office buildings. It was
people should go Google it. Go Google transom.
Yeah,
and find out what it is.
So you have to go out there and encourage people. And if there's people that you like, and you see them at conventions, because we all go to these unending conventions, and you talk to them, and you have lunch with them or whatever, and you ask, hey, what you got going? Do you have anything that we can help you out with or whatever? When it's a creator-owned property. Obviously, if it's a company-owned property, then the system is totally different. But you got to go out there as a publisher, and certainly as an editor, and nail down that talent and make the world comfortable for them, because they're not working for the publisher. They're working for the editor. They're working for you. They're working for the reader. The publisher is the last person involved in that. And their job essentially is to promote the book, which some of them do, pay for the book, which some of them do, and hire the right people to manage in every respect.
Right.
So it's a management job.
But I think they're one of the better ones. I think they're interested in making good comic books, and I think they are. I think they're putting out some good books. I think it's time to bring in our guest, because he's been waiting patiently in the green room, and I'm very excited for this. I have not spoken to our guest in a few years, and I am regretting that and looking forward to correcting that tonight. Our guest tonight is Jeff Parker. He is a comic book professional in every sense of the word, writer, artist, mind, and one of them has written some of my favorite comics over the past 20 years. And I'm not going to waste any more time being silly, and we will bring in Jeff Parker.
Is this thing on?
Parker. Hey, how are you?
How's it going, guys?
How are you?
The Harrison Gold team. This is awesome. The world's finest team. I I can't believe I'm getting to guest star in your book here. This is amazing.
Oh no. We're happy to have you. How are you doing? How's it out there? First of all, really
It's
crappy
cold and
in the
rainy because I'm in the
It's cold and
Northwest.
rainy. You sent some of your weather over here because it's cold and rainy here on the East
Yeah,
Coast.
it's just like that.
Yeah, it is where I am as well.
Wait, where are you, Mike?
I'm in Connecticut.
Oh,
And-
so it's always cold. Yeah, sure.
Well, really, I mean, just north of the New York border, we get Manhattan's weather, but it's really crappy this week.
Yeah, seems like it's going to be one of those winters.
Well, at least for a few weeks. Yeah, then it'll probably be in the 90s, and we'll all be bitching about how hot it is in February.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, Bob's right. I haven't talked to you in a couple of years. Mike, I haven't talked to you in like 25 years.
Jeez.
Yeah, you were sitting at the DC booth at San Diego one year. I don't know. You were telling some good stories. It was great stuff. I can't remember anything except that, like, well, that was fun, But yeah.
Well, I'm glad that the stories worked for you. I do tell a lot of stories, and the funny thing is, most of them are true. And
It had rings of truth, like that Dick Giordano transom story. Yeah,
and people who don't believe me when I tell them these stories, because why should I tell stories that are completely believable? They're boring. They later find out that what I was saying was true, and they're mad at me because they thought it was not true.
because it was too entertaining.
That's right. It's like, why are you mad at me for telling the truth?
Now you're not like some veterans I won't name who tell stories in order to kind of rewrite comics history.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that happens with anybody who used to work for Marvel or anything like that, but it's like yours are believable. And you reminded me of my first rejection letter was from Dick. I was in high school. Yeah, a classic, 16-year-olds assume they can get a job.
Right.
And so, I sent in some pages of actually it was Vigilante. It was like, and I don't think Vigilante had even come out yet. I just saw an ad for him coming up in the next year or something. And I went, that looks cool. That looks like what I like. And I drew some pages and sent them in, and Dick patted me on the head and said, you ain't ready to go away. But I was so excited because it was, it was the old DC letterhead where like the watermark had all the Justice League standing on each other's shoulders that you could see when you held it up to the light. I remember that paper.
I've seen that paper.
I've still got it somewhere. I loved it.
When I was working for DC in the 70s when we changed the logo and therefore the letterhead and all that.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of people were really angry, not at DC so much, but up in management at Warner Publishing, because that letterhead was really expensive. And one of America's top designers, Milt Glacier, designed all that. So it costs a fortune.
Exactly.
Wait,
I keep wondering about, like in the last 15 years, they went through like 5 new symbols over the thing, including the one I make fun of the most, the sanitary toilet thing, where it literally looks like you're pulling back the little sanitary thing that comes out when you're in a public restroom. I was like, and I remember at the time going, somebody got paid really good money for this stupid thing. And it wasn't around like a year or two before it was out of there. I like the one now a lot because it reminds me of the early 70s. It's
pre-bullet
logo a lot, just tweaked a little bit and putting a bullet like Milt Glacier did with the one everybody remembers.
You mean like this one right
here?
here?
It's that one up there in the corner of my book.
This one up here.
One. I like that one.
This is a good book.
Also, it does allow for opportunities that the Glacier symbol did not allow for. The Glacier used these ridiculous inlines in all of his work. I mean, he designed supermarkets, Grand Union supermarkets, and they had in those same inlines in the supermarket, not just in his magazines. But we were using those silly putty plates back then.
You're right.
So the lines would boogie up.
Uh-huh.
And when I was doing house ads, I was designing and writing the house ads in the 70s. I would use a small reproduction of that logo, and people couldn't read it.
Yeah.
So it drove me crazy. The new one, the latest one, at least you can put color behind it. You can do all kinds of beautiful color effects with it.
You're right. You can match it up to what else. One of my big problems with a lot of comics cover design is people will go nuts with the fonts, and it'll be like what my friend Chuck Wojtkiewicz would refer to. It turns into a ransom note because, suddenly like there's 6 different fonts on the cover and everything. Right. It's like, no, like that Batman Silent Night one does a really nice job. That may have been Pat Brousseau, I'm not sure. But, like you said, you can match the color of the DC Bullet up with it, and it all holds together. It looks, it's just,
or you can do the opposite. You can make it pop off of that.
Sure. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a very nice dress trade. I mean, I think
it is.
I think they did a good job with this. If it's the theme, somebody told me that apparently in this particular logo, like there's a lot of math in it, and like there's different symbols within the symbols. I don't know. I haven't delved that into it. But
I'm gonna. Wow. now I've got to look at it. No one told me about this, but
yeah, I don't know.
It holds together surprisingly well for to get the archaic look and all the various letters that they're using.
Yeah, like there's something like with the way that the little thing here happens. I don't know. There's a lot of it's a lot more involved than simply trying to go back to the old pre-bullet.
I love when somebody does. Yeah, I love when somebody does good lettering, like and logo design, because like some companies will literally just slap a font and put a layer effect on it, and that's what you're getting. And I mean, whether it holds together with the art or not,
Well, the great old joke is that the titles for Avatar is just papyrus. It's just a papyrus font.
It was, and you see how then the second one they changed it to try to get away from. It's like, man, you practically put Comic Sans as your font.
Comic Sans has gotten more abuse than it deserves. But I once got into a fight, not a physical fight, but an argument with Rich Vernon, for whom I have infinite respect. I mean, he's just brilliant. And he was brilliant long before he got to DC when he was doing the work for all those publishers. But he changed a logo or a cover design that I had come up with to use a different font. And I asked him why he did that. And he said, well, because Helvetica is boring. And I said, Helvetica is boring? You don't eat bread?
Yeah.
Helvetica, it's my God-given right to use Helvetica. It's like building Helvetica, we don't have words.
Right.
You get into
Helvetica fits in with so many things, like Futura. It fits in with a lot of stuff. And, like when you have a subtitle or whatever, it's like it's there for you. It comes through. It's not Hobo or whatever font, people used to use when they didn't have that many fonts.
Well, the first thing they teach you in design school, and I took design at the Art Institute in Chicago. So,
yeah.
But
no, that's not too shabby. That's pretty good.
Well, that's why I said it. But the first thing they tell you is like, don't use all the fonts you can find. As a matter of fact, keep it down to just a few, 2, 3, because it's not the font that's the purpose. It's the font that's the mood. And you can't create a schizophrenic mood.
Right.
And I think that that's very, very true. It's a very simple lesson.
Well, and then you went into periodicals, which like forces so much lettering and imagery at you to juggle all the time. It's a lot of. I used to really like, and I think he still does it. Dave Johnson would always do covers where he would ask, like, it's like, where are you guys going to, he wouldn't necessarily ask, he would make a place for the barcode to go.
Mhm.
And so that, because he didn't want it on his art elements, so he'd carve out a place or whatever. And every time like he ever did a cover on something I was working on, I would always call him up and like, see where you left for the barcode. And then they put it somewhere else. But most of the time he was very good about that. Sometimes I would get to do cover treatments like at Marvel. Like I would say, let me do the cover, like Agents of Atlas. I did that a lot. I would like the second logo that came out with the little dragon in the world. That's all me. And I think I got a whopping $500 or something for that. But then I did this thing on the last series where I kind of framed the whole cover. What I really like is I used to love the old style DCs like Swamp Thing, where you'd have the Gaspar Saladino logo up there and it's like almost half the page, but it leaves you a square, which is not necessarily the greatest shape to fit art in. But I just liked that look of it. It was a very old pulp magazine sort of look.
It's one of the
and I was trying to do
all time.
Yeah, I was trying to do a little bit of that where I was like, let's make a black box or a color box around the art imagery so the artist doesn't have to worry about where the logo is falling. The logo's in this part of it, separate in a color or black. And then the art can be left alone to just show off the art. And that I don't know. I feel like artists get messed with a little bit too much. They get stuff slapped all over their pictures that they spent so much time on. And I'm always trying to combat it. Yeah.
That's absolutely true. I mean, part of it is because, you have 17 people after the artist whose fingerprints are all over the work.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't mean that they're being malicious or the first guy is trying to correct the second guy or whatever. Sometimes that's true, and sometimes they're malicious, but very rarely each person is doing their job. This is what we call bureaucracy, and it is the antithesis of creativity. Bureaucracy is the antithesis of creativity. I want that on my tombstone.
Hang on, I'm writing that.
Noted.
Thank you.
What's Dino asking there? What I missed that.
Oh, Dino here?
He was saying, Dino said, ahoy, he's here. Wanted to say he's had the honor of working with you a few times and is brilliant storyteller and generous. Gosh,
yeah, super fun working with Haspiel.
Happy New Year, Dino.
Yeah,
it is. It's also fun teasing him.
Oh yeah, no, that's most of the fun. Yeah,
it's most of the fun. Yeah.
But nah,
so
what a great artist.
Isn't this Dave Johnson?
I believe it is a Dave Johnson cover.
I believe it is Dave Johnson. He just said, "Screw it, no room for nothing. I'm just going to cover everything."
Yeah, I'm going to put little ninjas all over the place. Put the barcode on the back if you don't like it. Yeah, that's nice.
He probably knew that was going to happen, though.
This solves the thing. You often hear retailers getting pretty salty about like, put the logo at the top because the way I rack books, it sticks out. I need people to read it, blah, blah, blah. And like Gold Key used to get around that by they'd put the logo in 3 different places or something or whatever. Dave really covered his ground here by just ninjak. No matter which way that sticks out, you're going to know what book it is.
Yeah, pretty much.
And it's going to pop off the rack.
Yeah.
You're going to see it before you see any other title around it. And that's the trick to selling comics. People don't, not everybody starts with issue number 1, no matter how many issue number 1s you give them.
Right.
I don't know if Doctor Strange has the record, but it's pretty close. How many number 1s? It drives me crazy. But the attitudes change much more slowly than the marketing. Our logos used to be because everybody worked in New York, and the newsstands in New York had their comic books sort of clipped to the top of a wire running across the top of a newsstand, a corner newsstand. Well, not a lot of other places. I mean, big cities, downtown areas, sure, but not a lot of other places kept up that model for very long. So if you wonder why everybody had these huge logos in the early 40s, it's because they wanted to be seen on these newsstands that didn't really exist in most of the country.
I mean, like Whiz. It's just it's just enormous.
Well, DC in particular, action and detectives, those logos were bigger than the content sometimes, but then they shrunk them down after the war, around 48. And that's because, the newsstands would show you partial covers. So they had to put the little picture of the character in the upper
corner,
left. Even DC did that.
Yeah.
Although not across the board. Marvel, of course, did it right. When we did it in '62, that was perfect, and we still
you get little heads up in the corner.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah.
Dino's got a Ninja question, so let's talk about Ninja.
Dean's trying to set me up, but go ahead.
Yeah. So the new book just came out with Mike Norton. Issue 1 just came out, and it's split into 2 double-sized issues, right? It was originally supposed to be 4 issues. Now it's 2 double-sized issues or something like that.
Yeah, I have no idea what's going on.
Right. Well, I don't want to.
They send me some.
I don't want to get involved in Valiant's head, but you have worked on that character before. You worked on it with Javier, as Dean was mentioning. What do you enjoy about that character per se?
Oh, well,
we're just transitioning into a little bit more Jeff Parker stuff here.
Because it's James Bondy stuff, and I love James. And of course, I've worked on the James Bond origin thing, which is really a kind of covert way to do a World War II comic. Which otherwise, who would ever look at it? But working with Javier, though, got to watch my terms. I love working with Javier. He's a very demanding guy.
Why do you say that? Why is he demanding? Is he demanding to his writer?
He can be kind of abrasive with the crew, but and this isn't necessarily a good thing, but I kind of grew up around people like that, so I'm used to dealing with it. Like I can read a screed, just coming in and just like, and then I'll get down to the little part with the key thing to address in it, and then I'll just say, "Hey, it looks great," and it always works. I'm just trying to. I mean, it's like Alex Toth is one of my big heroes. And everybody got an earful of Toth who worked with. But that's kind of the way some of the brilliant artists are. It doesn't excuse anything, obviously. But at the same time, I will put up with a lot when I know I'm going to see a superior job. It's like I turn off the get insulted part or whatever, and even Javier realizes it later. And oh yeah, that's a good way to put it. He's the Jaime Hernandez of superhero comics.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
That's a great way to put it. And he's a lot like what's his name? Who draws a lot? Like he always kind of gets alternated in with Javier. Did a lot of Spider-Man.
Humberto Ramos.
I'm just blanking because I was out in the rain all day or something. I'll come back to it. But anyway, yeah, Javier. The thing is, though, Javier needs to be doing in my opinion, and I've told him this, like, yes, Marcos Martin, good God, Haspiel, just stay on. Like, I need you. But like,
we all need Dean.
In my esteem, Javier really at this point, I mean, he's proven everything he has to prove in superhero books. He needs to be creating his own stuff, right, and doing like bande dessinée type things. And I would buy every single one of them or whatever. And he and I have talked about possibly doing something like that. And I've like,
that's great.
And then of course the entire world turned upside down a few years ago, and just like with everything going on, like a lot of my great plans went poof. And I'm sure his did too. But it reminds me to get in touch with him and see how he's doing and everything. Like,
there you go.
I think he's brilliant.
You're right. And the better you are, the more gifted you are, the more people are going to put up with you. And the problem is people are going to put up with those idiosyncrasies to the point where the stars sometimes take that for granted.
Yeah.
And they keep on getting harder to work with.
Right. And they double down on everything.
And because they get away with it, I will not take this into Donald Trump, but I was warned against Alex Toth, working with Alex Toth. And my response, of course, was, what are you talking about? He's the greatest storyteller of all time. Well, there's a list of those, but it's a short list, and he's definitely on it. And they said, well, you don't want to work with him. And people tell me why. And I worked with him, and I got mine the same way everybody else did. Absolutely everybody else. So I'm at this convention. I've told the story here, I think, before.
I don't know about this one.
I was at this convention, and I don't remember where it was, but I do remember that I was at one corner of the floor, and the bathroom was at the opposite corner of the floor, about 6 miles away. So I'm walking through the crowds to get to the bathroom, and I hear this voice going, "Hey, Mike!" Now, usually I blow it off because you may not have noticed, but Mike is a relatively common name. But I recognized the voice. It's like, holy shit. And I turned, and it was Carmine Infantino. He was just back on the convention circuit. And I go over there. I forget about the fact that my bladder is about to explode. No, it's Carmine. And he says, "Thought I worked with Toth." And I says, "Yeah." And he says, "And it blew up in your face." I says, "Yeah." He said, "I warned you against them." "Yes, you did. And I should have heeded your warning, but look what we got out of it."
Yeah.
And he said, "Yeah, I know. It's the only reason why that guy gets work."
All you got to do when people write you an angry letter or a postcard in Toth's case with a little duck drawn on it or whatever, you got to just do that kind of sort of thing where you kind of go slightly cross-eyed, so you just kind of blur down the text, and it's easy not to take it so personally because like whoever was going to get the letter was getting that. I put out, I don't know if you guys ever saw the Alex Toth Doodle book that came out in the aughts, and I published that. And it was because at the time I was on the Alex Toth forums and everything, and Alex was participating, and it was really cool. Kevin Nolan was on there and everything, and everybody was bugging him for questions, and he started doing this kind of director's commentary with some of his old stories where they'd send him his story, and Toth had this crazy good memory. He could remember stuff from 50 years ago like it was yesterday. And he'd write down what was going on and a lot of his gripes. And then he'd remember everything that it's like, I should have changed this. This is what I meant to do. Blah, 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 blah. Like, how can you even remember some Warren story from 1974? But he's going through and he's adding all this stuff, and it's fascinating to read. And my friend John Hitchcock, who runs Parts Unknown Comics,
Right.
and
This is Dear John book, right?
yeah, that's it. It's Dear John, the Alex Doodle book. And John had been corresponding with Alex for years. He had him out for a show, and Toth had said, "Hey, I can't get these certain kind of cigarettes here in LA." And and since he was writing to North Carolina, the land of tobacco, John would just like contraband send him his favorite cigs. It's like, now we're like, that wasn't too healthy, but he'd send him those. And then kind of as a nice exchange, Alex would send him whatever he'd generate piles of doodles and sketches and ideas that he just generally left over in a stack, making a fire hazard. So he started sending them to John, and John ended up with just tons of artwork from him. And it's all just brilliant little stuff. And you can see how he thought and like what he was planning at a time. And in a few places you can go, oh, this is when he was going to work on Bravo for Adventure. He's already figuring out some stuff here and all that, or what stuff like that. And John was just going to make a Kinko's copy sort of thing to sell at shows. And I said, hey, I just printed the Interman, my graphic novel, and I've still got barcodes. Do you want me to just make a book? Because I just didn't want it to be some ring bound thing. I was like, this should be a book. And then Alex agreed for it to be done. He just demanded, like, no one ever sends me the books. Send me some books. And I was like, you bet. It's like, I am good. I was so excited because, like, at the time I was living in Los Angeles, and I was, and I had written to him a couple of times. Like, I sent him my book, and he sent me a nice letter where he chided me a little bit about laying on the photo reference too much, and gave me some good advice. It was great. And then some other time I sent him some candy. So I guess I'm not much better than John about that, but it was something he had asked for on the forum. And so anyway, that's when his health started going downhill. But then, like, he got to look at the galleys right before they went to the printer, and he said, this looks good. Let's go ahead with it and everything. And I was just so disheartened when he died, because I was looking forward to, in my mind, I was going to take just cases of these books over to his porch, and just like, all the books you want, Alex, blah, 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 and just load them up. And then, and also I was going to just give him the money after paying off my costs for the publisher or whatever. Instead, I ended up sending it to one of his sons, who was the executor of his estate, until I ran out of books. And then I sent the rest of the books to John, who I think still has a few boxes of them. Printed a few thousand. So as far as I know, the only place you can get those are from John's direct shop. You got to write to him or call him or something.
I'll have to do that. But
anyway, it's like that's one of my great disappointments, that I didn't get to go over there and like show up with, I often complain about a lot of artists, cartoonists will go do a pilgrimage to their art heroes, and they just kind of show up like, here I am. And I understand, because I've kind of done that myself. But I was going to take food and stuff. I was like, why don't these guys all these guys who went to see Ditko, why didn't they stop at the deli and go up with a big bag of food at the time? Don't just show up like your good looks are going to get you in the door. See? Yeah.
I actually in the 70s made a habit of taking Steve out for lunch and dinner.
And it worked.
Well, let me tell you something. First time I was scared shitless, because given Steve's view of the world, I was afraid that he would be offended if I paid for it, because he knew that DC was paying for it.
Right.
And that wasn't part of the deal. But no, he was fine with lunch.
Yeah. Everybody's fine with. There's nothing a freelancer wants more than someone to take them out to lunch. How hard is this? Come on, people, take us all out to lunch. That's all we want.
Well, we were talking about Giordano. Dick and I used to have fun with each other's expense accounts.
Yeah, I bet.
And after both of us left DC, and I should point out that was actually timed. I gave 3 months notice, and right about the same day he gave 6 months notice. He had to move that up a little bit because his wife had died.
Oh.
But after all of that, we're up here in Connecticut where we both lived, and we go out for lunch. And then the check comes. And we're staring at it. It's like, holy shit, we're going to have to pay for this.
You got to pay for this now.
That was hilarious. We both broke up. It was unbelievable. It was wonderful.
Those magic cards.
Yeah. I want to just do a little bit of your history. You grew up in North Carolina. Obviously, that time you were doing that work. By the way, I want to go back to this. You should not feel badly or guilty in any way for the Dear John thing not happening the way you ideally would have wanted it to, because what you did was fantastic. The concept that you made that book, the concept that you put that together, that he got some level of enjoyment out of it, you win. So
yeah.
Yeah. But
it was a nice thing to be able to surprise artists with at shows, because every good artist loves Toth or whatever. And when you show them like, hey, guess what I've got? They're like, dear, you know. So
yeah, I mean, like I think a couple of times this year I went through like one of the art vendors, and there's a Toth section, and it's just scribbles. It's just doodles, but they're doodles. They're Toth doodles, you know?
Yeah.
But anyway, so you were doing storyboard stuff in LA, and you made your way up to Portland now, right? You're in the Portland area.
Yeah.
One of the things I think
a little more than 20 years ago. Yeah.
One of the things interesting about your career and the way that you work is that you have traditionally worked in a studio. Right. And what attracts that type of work environment for you?
Well,
like, and I also, my question is, when you were at Artemis in North Carolina, was that before they got the copy machine or after the copy machine?
I was there when they got the copy machine.
So you were there. Were you there for that? The reason they got the copy machine?
Yes.
Okay.
The whole the Ultraverse wanted a book done in a few days. I forgot why or whatever. We all had to chip in.
It was issue 2, issue 1. Issue 1 was out. Issue 2 was late, and you guys did the whole book in a week.
Yeah.
And that's how Rich tells it.
We thought a good use of our money was to buy a copy machine. Now I would never do that. But, you know, at the time it was
it was important.
It was important. Like, you know, I remember I used to do assistant work for Bo Hampton. And that was some of my, for when I was still in college, I would drive down to South Carolina where Bo lived. And he was using one of those little vertical art projectors or whatever, where he'd do his thumbnails, then blow it up real big and then do a tracing off, you know. So we didn't have to do that because we had a copier. But of course, every time it broke down, we had to call somebody because no one knew how to fix it. And
now I
also ended up doing a little bit of work for his brother Scott too. Like I was just filling in blacks and stuff, but it was great because the guys were both a wealth of knowledge. They were into all the same artists I was into. I just loved it, just like soaking that all up. Bo had been an assistant to Al Williamson for a little bit. And right before Artemis happened and everything, when I was still in school, I had driven up. Now here's where I just crashed in on people without taking food. I went up. Al Williamson invited me to come up. And so one summer I went up with a friend and went to his house and everything. And that same trip, I went over and met Mark Schultz and Denise, his wife, and have been friends with them ever since. And it was just amazing. Like Al was like the first person who ever let me come sit behind the table Like, he was going to tell me some stuff and give me some pointers, but he never had time because he was Al Williamson and people would not stop handing him Star Wars comics. So
How does one get an invitation from Al Williamson to come up and visit?
Because I was the only young guy who, instead of plopping down a bunch of superhero stuff in front of him, was drawing sort of adventure, realistic looking stuff. And somewhere in one panel, I remember I had drawn this little alien kid from one of his EC stories. And he looked at it and laughed and like, oh, okay, you actually know who I am and what I've done. You know, it was probably a real novelty for him. I wasn't just there because, like, Han Solo or something.
One of the nicest guys on earth.
Yeah, he was a prince. I love that guy so much. I went up to see him again a few years later, and he took me out to lunch. And at that point, he had moved to a different house, and he didn't have his backyard studio anymore. He was actually in the building where they make the magazine highlights.
Okay.
You know Goofus and Gallant very well. You've had him on the show. And I remember peeking in, going, "They're making highlights. This is like every dentist trip I ever had, just in where it ever came together and everything." And and then Al took me down to the street and got me some lunch and everything, and was telling me fun stories. Like he told me about the time he went to visit Alex Raymond. And I was like, oh, like a servant came to the door and everything, because Raymond was quite well off, and how he found out later that, like, he was really just being an Agog fan. He didn't realize until a friend of his later said, I think he wanted you to be his assistant. And I was like, me? What? Or whatever. And of course, then the irony, he ends up working on everything Raymond ever created. Pretty much.
Well, it's funny
like
because
X9 and Flash,
So we had Ron Randall on a couple months ago.
I am aware of his work.
And he said, I asked him my question of, what was the first comic you remember? And it was a Al Williamson Flash Gordon. So there you go.
Yeah, and I know the ones he's talking about were, like, Al did 2 or 3 issues in the 60s. Yeah. And if you can ever track them down, they're just amazing. They're some of my favorite comics work. It's just so good.
Flash Gordon?
Yeah.
With Archie? I'll tell you where I bought
it was Archie had written them. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you where I bought the first issue of that. I was a small child. I mean, I was in my early teens, and we were driving through Western Michigan. My father pulls over to tank up the car, right? And so I go in to see if there's any comic books. Of course.
Priorities.
As one does.
That's right. And this place didn't have a spinner rack or anything, but they had these bags of comics off to the side. And I'm looking at them, and it's King Comics. And I never heard of King Comics, and I knew
King Comics
every comic that was published.
Yeah.
So what the hell? But we didn't have fanzines to tell us what was coming out that week, So I didn't know about King Comics. And in this bag was a copy of Flash Gordon #1, The Phantom #1, and Mandrake #1.
Yeah.
And the backup stories were done by like Wally Wood and stuff. And I was a big Al Williamson fan already by that point in time. And I knew what sort of an impact Alex Raymond had on him. I mean, it's obvious from looking at his work, but, I understood that. And we shared that love of that work. And this comic book was published for me. And somehow the fates conspired to put me in this gas station in southwestern Michigan at the right moment in time for me to buy these books.
That is, and it is those King Comics. That's the ones I'm talking about.
Yeah. Oh, those were great. Those were great. And I mean, luckily I got to work with Archie, and he and I had like offices next to each other, and we'd go out to lunch all the time and stuff. And he would talk about working with Al, who's just one of the nicest and most awesome people.
There it is. Thank you. Look how good that is. My
I know.
God, that's the
Good
best.
isn't enough. It's brilliant.
This is we have this to blame for Ron Randall.
Yeah, well, I think Ron would be happy to be accused of that because, he's been doing killer stuff on his Trekker series and he's built a loyal following. It's he's been giving me tons of advice on how to do the Kickstarter thing or whatever. He's really figuring it out, and it's it's great watching it come together.
Let's talk about Kickstarter. You have you did one lighter with
Yes,
Drew Moss.
I did. There it is. If you aim it right. Okay, there it is.
Yeah.
Talking
So
Tiger
now,
Man who fights monsters on our dimension. Yeah.
what is the exact status of that?
It's out. I believe almost everybody's gotten their copy now.
Well, I have like a stack of Kickstarters I haven't opened. It's over here. So
it's
I went
got to be
looking
in there. It's in there.
I went looking for it, but maybe it's somewhere else. I know I knew I backed it, and so I'm gonna put in the chat. I'm gonna put the link because people can still go on BackerKit and order it. Is that right?
I think
It's
they can
available.
try. They may be able to. I'm not sure.
I'm
I
gonna
thought
put it in there.
I thought all the ones put it in there anyway.
Put it in
Who knows? You'll definitely now see them with me at shows. Like I'll be at Emerald City this year, and finally I'll have this book out, and that'll be exciting to take. Drew Moss drew it, and and oddly enough, he's now the artist on Thundercats. It's like, well, that was a nice complimentary.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, and it looks really good. Declan Shalvey's writing it. It's gonna be really nice.
Well, so there's going to be new Flash Gordon this year too, because Mad Cave has that.
Well, I'm really loving the Flash Gordon comic strip Dan Scotte's working on.
Yes,
Really
it's amazing.
Dan's a good friend, and I really appreciate he called me before he started doing it. Dean's the Penguin guy, and he was just talking about some of the things he was going to do, but he undersold himself. He's really just gone above and beyond right out the gate. It's hard to come right out the gate like that, like I think you guys probably have talked about this before, how like TV shows and comics don't get that year or two to mature and find their real calling,
Sure.
and everything. So you've got to somehow magically run through it in your head and get to that point, because people aren't going to give you that time. And but I've loved watching the reaction to it, because he's really just woke the whole thing up. It's very exciting. I think he's getting what people love about it. I think a lot of people didn't know what to think of Flash Gordon. I was super excited when Nate Cosby at Dynamite, showed me a list a few years ago and was like, which of these features would you like, do you think you would do well with? And I went, Flash Gordon. I have things about Flash Gordon to say. And then he called Evan Shaner, and we did our run on that. And that led to Evan and I working on Future Quest and all the stuff that we did.
We're gonna talk about Future Quest.
Oh, good. And the 2-part Captain Marvel family thing, and DC's. I've suddenly forgot about what the event was called. The real event was DC was moving to the West Coast, so they had to fill a couple of months while that was going on. Yeah. And yeah,
I know, it was Convergence.
Thank you.
You did Hawkman there.
Yeah, I did Hawkman with Tim Truman, and which was exciting as hell. And Captain Marvel versus Gotham by Gaslight Batman with Evan and Jordi Belair coloring it. And that was just it was literally a dream come true. I know it's a cliche, but we all wanted to work on that, and that was exciting.
That's why we're here. Right. We get the opportunity to swim in waters that heretofore were unseen. You love Flash Gordon. I grew up watching those serials on television. Charles Middleton is still my all-time favorite villain. great stuff. I saw the Alex Raymond work and now Al Williamson. Your stuff was really good. But and will be, I'm sure. But the magic moment for Flash Gordon for me was when I saw the new strip in the Washington Post.
Yeah.
That just blew me away. It's like, holy crap, this is working.
Yeah. People are reading a Sunday comic again. This is great.
Yeah.
It's Sunday really and daily. It's amazing.
Yeah, the daily stuff. And he's again, and you know why so many people moved away, like Watterson, like, okay, I can't work with these postage stamp sizes. Somehow Dan's making it work. And I feel like actually what prepared him for that was he did a webtoon that's amazing called Lavender Jack. If costs nothing to read, just go find webtoon and dig around for his name and Lavender Jack. And it's this kind of steampunk era hero, and it's super fascinating, just really entertaining stuff. But he had to do the whole webtoon thing of figuring out a constant feed downward
in the vertical scroll.
It's a weird way to think. I did a story like that and never did anything with it, but I was just really trying to figure out how to do that for him, just in case that became the new standard. I was like, I better adapt. And it's like, and he really started figuring out how to do these transitions and how to do stuff that, while to not, you gotta walk that line of not killing yourself and giving everybody, just plenty of what they want. And, that not everybody can do that. And that's why a lot of people move on to another industry. But I think Scotty's got it down. And the Flash Gordon stuff is just dead on. He makes all the characters worth reading. You don't sit there and wait like, I wish they'd hurry up and just get back to Dale or whatever. It's like everybody's fun to read. Ming's great.
So
I agree 100%.
I absolutely do.
Yeah, it's very heartening, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah,
it's like really good.
This isn't dead. I thought that medium was dead. The continuity strip medium, and it really was. I mean, there was Dick Tracy and the Phantom, and nothing else.
Right.
Well, I mean, Prince Valiant, of course, but now there's 3.
Yeah. Well, and Valiant, even though, like, going back to Mark Schultz, he was working on it with Gary Gianni and then now Tom Yates, I think.
Yeah.
I could be behind on that sort of stuff. I don't know.
I think Tom Yates is still doing it.
But I feel like and it's always beautiful and I love to look at it and read it, but I always felt like Flash Gordon captured people the way Valiant didn't, because they had word balloons. It wasn't narrated illustration, and comics just have that more immediacy to them, where it
draws you into the panel.
It pulls you in. It's somewhere. It's not, obviously not live action, but it's not prose either. It's this weird thing somewhere off on its own that uses both of them.
And what you're saying is a great analysis, because it's not prose. Neither is Valiant, but Valiant is closer to prose than what you were getting out of Flash Gordon.
I mean, God. But let me jump back to that Al Williamson first visit. That was the first time I ever saw a full Hal Foster page up on a wall. Oh, it was just gorgeous. This thing of Valiant coming under this big arch of a castle and everything with tons of people around. And I'm just like, and it's impossibly big. It's like, as you know, they tend to cut them up in panels at some point and sell them like that or whatever. But no, he had a whole cool page. And, I'm sorry to just keep jumping back to lunches with Al Williamson, like I had a billion of them. But
listen,
when I went to that second time when he took me out to eat, and we were talking about Raymond for a while, because it's easy to get him on his favorite subject. He was talking about when he was working on the newspaper strips, and it might have been X9. at the time. But so he went to King Features to the building, and I think he was dropping off something or probably hounding them for a check or something typical freelancery, and he went in the back, and kind of near where all the presses was what you call the morgue in any newspaper, and it's like where they put all the old issues and the material and stuff like that. And he goes up there and he looks, and suddenly he sees just stacks and stacks, big as a kid, and it's like old Flash Gordon strips and X9 and stuff like that. Now, if I'm getting it right, he was working on X9 at the time. That seems right. It's the 60s. And he realized at this moment, as he described it to me, he had to play it so incredibly cool. He couldn't act like he was literally holding bars of platinum,
But he was.
Yeah, which he was.
Yeah.
And so like whoever the press guys were back there, or who's running that part of the building, he acted as disaffected and bored as he possibly could, and said like, "Hey, I could use some of this stuff with doing the strip or whatever. Do you guys need these, or is there any way I can get them?" Like, and the guy goes, "Oh yeah, we're probably going to throw that stuff away eventually when we finally clean up or whatever." Like, "Oh, okay." And, obviously he's hearing something horrific, but he's not reacting to it. And
Right.
He said he had like a little hatchback. I don't know what kind of car it would have been at the time. Could have been a Mopar or something. Let's just say it was. And then so he just starts quietly loading his back of his car just full of Alex Raymond art, and just jams it completely full. I like to imagine the car is just like bottoming out as he drives away, and it's like, and I realized that's where a lot of his collection came from, because I had seen it the first time going through some big flat files, and my brain couldn't take it in, because it's every one of his friends. It's tons of Wally Wood art. It's Angelo Torres. It's Roy Krinkle. It's just tons and tons of art. Frazetta, and I'm like, how can there be this much of this in one place? And I'm just looking through it, and that second story confirmed to me. Now I know how he has so much of this. Like, surely he bought and traded for a lot of it, but a lot of it he simply walked out of King Features, and there,
I love that
is out on that. There's nothing they can do about it, and sorry, and Al's dead. So what are you gonna do?
Oh, that's a fantastic story. I love that.
Yeah, that's one of those things where finally a good guy won. The right person got that stuff. Yeah, I wasn't around in the 60s. I was in baby form, Deans. But I would have tried as a baby to carry some art out. Yeah.
His house? Like, can I take a souvenir? There is an artist I know who showed up at all right. So there's an artist who showed up at another artist house because he found that person to be interesting, and he wanted to talk to that person. And when he left, he was telling the artist that you need to give me something to take with me to leave. That is balls. Like, that's the perfect definition of that.
Well, did the guy get
a gun? I mean,
did the guy get shot? I hope.
No, he's a very tall man. He's very convincing because he won't leave.
Oh, I'd make him leave. I hate hearing
pretty
stuff
rude.
like that. Oh God. Yeah, most fans, though, I mean, I think we'll all agree, most fans are pretty, despite what people say about comics fans or whatever, are generally pretty polite.
Sure.
Yes.
And very sweet and everything. But there is always one of those bastards who have to abuse their just lucky thing of getting to visit somebody.
Sure.
It's just like real life. Most of us are okay.
Well, that's when you're supposed to give some comics to. Here you go. Get out of here. Don't ever come back.
That's right.
Here's some comics I can't sell. Go away.
Let me tell you a quick Al Williamson story.
Oh,
nobody ever turned down an assignment from me with as much a plum as L. Williamson. And the funniest thing is, I knew going in he was going to turn it down because he didn't hate DC. He hated a couple of the people at DC because he thinks they screwed him over, and maybe they did. I'm not, Lord knows that's happened.
Sure.
I won't go into details. But I had Black Canary, and I had an artist that I needed to put on Black Canary. First thing in my mind, L. Williamson.
That would have been pretty great.
It would have been just phenomenal, And he said so. He agreed. He thought it would have been terrific, but he just couldn't work for DC. And okay, I mean, he has a right to that, and he has a right to not want to work in a place where he feels he was mistreated.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But boy, it's one of those things, and we all have been there.
You had to try.
What would have happened if he said yes? Because sometimes they do.
Yeah. It never hurts to ask.
It never hurts to ask.
Because you never know. You might get him at the right time. Yeah. Wait, did you get him to do Toth to do that Black Canary story?
No, I got him to do a Black Canary cover though.
Okay.
Wait. Is the artist who took the job somebody we talked about tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
Bob and I just riff on people before.
You got to warm up, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Stuff we're not going to say on the air.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about it. I need to let you know that anybody who runs into me at shows, and I go to a few,
I've heard
at some point I will go out, get on my soapbox, and I will scream to the heavens that DC is just wasting so much money not having you drawing a Johnny Quest book or writing a Johnny Quest book.
I was really hoping they would let me do like just a graphic novel after Future Quest.
Like
that's what I wanted to do.
I agree.
It is criminal the way that they are just wasting this, because there's no reason why, for what you did on Future Quest, the building a universe that didn't exist, that was something that you put it together in a cohesive way, told a very good story over 20 issues, just about, was fantastic, and they just walked away from it. I can never understand that.
It wasn't just them walking away from it. You got to remember, Hanna-Barbera is a different division of Warner Brothers,
right?
And they got tired. I don't know what, they just got tired of working with DC. Like it was probably just an extra headache for them. They didn't make any more money on.
A couple of the editors of those books told me that it was just a terrible working relationship because Hanna-Barbera and worse still, the licensing people,
yes,
just hated what you guys were doing.
Yeah.
And in my book, you guys were doing some really phenomenal, interesting.
I was reading about all of that. I was so into Mark Russell and Steve Poo's Flintstones. I was like, how is Flintstones this goddamn good? I was like,
exactly.
I was super excited for that book to come out every month.
Yes, yep. I know, and you shouldn't have been, because
doesn't make any sense. Hanna-Barbera, why am I excited about Flintstones? Yeah.
Hanna-Barbera won a GLAAD award.
Well,
I'm just saying. I mean that too. The Snagglepuss Chronicles won a GLAAD award.
That's good. Well, that was a good story too. Well, anything those guys touch is amazing. I love Mark Russell's stuff. What a lot of people don't realize about the Future Quest thing was, as I understand it, originally Dan had approached Darwin with the whole thing, because the first thing they ever sent me was like, we're going to send you something. You can't talk about it to anybody. And I was like, okay, or whatever. I think I was about to go, like I was about to go to the Baltimore show in a few days. And suddenly in my inbox shows up this picture of all those characters, like drawn by Darwin. And I was like, what the hell is this? This is amazing. and I think what then happened was Darwin said, like, I can't do all this on my own. It's like, but I just read Flash Gordon by Parker and Shaner. This is what I as I understand it, and I'm going to buy what Darwin said a lot. Is like, you need to bring these guys in and I can work with them and I'll work on the pitch and everything. And then Evan got approached, and Evan, of course, immediately like dropped everything and went tap, tap, tap. Yes, yes, yes. And right. So luckily I just happened to be going to Baltimore, and Darwin was appearing there this weekend. So he did this great thing where, he just wanted to talk to me about a few ideas he had. He said, I've just got some rough ideas. I don't really know the story yet or anything. And he's like, he had a line way down the hall of people coming up to him, just wanting little sketches and signing his books and everything. And literally the line would have stayed like that all day. He just had pretty much stopped when he saw me and put a sign down and said, I'll be back in 35 minutes. Sorry. Or whatever. And then I felt horrible because those people stood in line, and then we go walking outside or whatever. And he was talking to me about, by the way, Darwin and I had first met, when I was doing storyboards in LA. I was working for Sony on the Big Guy and Rusty the Boy robot cartoon.
Right.
And Darwin was a director.
Thank you.
Huh?
Thank you for that.
Oh yeah, it was a great cartoon. I was really lucky to work on it. And Darwin was working on the Men in Black cartoon as a director. Yeah. And I was in a cubicle, and they placed me back with the Men in Black guys because there was no more room up in the Rusty room. And I was like right around the corner from Darwin. So like I was bugging him all the time back then, like just asking him like, how do you guys do things over at Warner? I was just like, I was just bugging him about Batman for the most part. And he'd tell me all this cool stuff. So anyway, like we go outside, and he's telling me like, I don't know exactly how it all comes together, but I'm picturing this thing where Johnny and Haji are flying around on jetpacks out in the Florida jungle, and they find the crashed Phantom Cruiser in a dead tundra. And he's like, that's all I got. I don't know. That's what's come to. And it was fascinating for me because I was like, oh, he comes up with stories the same way I do, where like he'll get flashes of scenes and there's no logic to it yet or anything, but he knows that it's a great moment.
Like, this happens.
This is going to happen.
And I got to figure out how to get there.
Do you know what that is channeling? That is channeling improv. That's how improv works. You get some of the greatest improv talent together in a room, and they've been thrown all these unconnected ideas, and in relatively short order, they whip together a story. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, because they put that story up on stage immediately.
Yeah.
But if it works, and often it does, it's brilliant.
No, I often think of this stuff as improv, or at least ad lib. And so I was just taking that in or whatever. And then I let Darwin go back in, because it's like, let's go back in. There's 100 people waiting for you. And when I got on the flight heading back to Portland, I had my computer open, and like the whole thing just started coming to me. I just started writing all this stuff and how it all could come together. And I thought about how Space Ghost would be the last of his whole, essentially the Lone Ranger, but married to the Green Lantern Corps sort of idea, where like he was the last one left. The Ghost Planet actually used to be a thriving home base for them, and all these characters. And that they all probably wore the same costumes Jan and Jace did. And like, you know, he gave them that. He's trying to rebuild the whole thing. And then here's the weird part. Like, as I came up with now I'm forgetting the chrono, whatever the monster I called him at the time, the time thingy, or whatever, the big nasty kind of mass that eats people and kills tons of people in the book. When I was thinking of that, I was actually thinking of it as a cancer. And if you look through the book, you'll see we refer to it at times as we talk about it metastasizing and things like that. And I had no idea this was what was going on with Darwin at the time. Sure. Darwin had just early on, like, he was originally going to draw sections of the book and everything. And then he wrote to me and said, "Hey, something's come up. I got another thing I got to work on. I'm sorry, Parker. I got to back out. We'll work together again." And everything. I was like, crap, that would have been so fun with Darwin doing sections of the book. And of course, now we know what was going on.
Sure.
Right.
He was like, you know, he had his terminal diagnosis, but he still decided to spend all that time working with, you know, Beto Hernandez on the something children. What's it called? Not Indigo Children. That's a different book. Come on, somebody from the viewing audience who answers things. I love when people are like, I've probably got it in my closet right here if I can just dig through it. But you know, he went and did that whole series, which is like, good grief, what a commitment. And it was probably because he always wanted to work with Gilbert and you know, and got that all done somehow. It's like, what a guy. And when you look at his relatively short time that he was working in comics, he put out so much great work.
Yeah.
It's impressive. It's like, he's got as much as a whole lifetime for other artists crammed into a small section. And we were often thinking of Future Quest as essentially a version of the New Frontier. Twilight Children. Thanks, Deans.
It does. It does.
What would I do without that guy?
The villain has a similar motif, kind of like that. It's not necessarily a you know, a mustache twirling, you know, person. It's just the inevitable, like the center. And that's
exactly the way I thought of it. It's an inevitable thing that you're going to run into. It's coming to your planet, and it doesn't have motives. It's just, it lives by killing everybody. And so anyway, to me, what made the whole thing able to come together in my head, though, was the fact that Toth had designed so many of the characters. The only ones that temporarily threw me, but not for long, were the fact that DiDio wanted the Impossibles in there.
Right. And you got Craig did those. Yeah.
Craig Rousseau ended up drawing it because I kept pushing, like, Craig Rousseau would be perfect. We'll start it out like, you know, because he's the perfect, in my mind, sort of like segue between cartoony and the kind of Toth look that we're doing in the story and everything. And I love his sections. I thought they worked so well, and they should have done more of it. So yeah, that all came together, and I was impressed. Oh yeah. And Shaner then somewhere like said, "Can Dino Boy be in it?" And I was like, so I asked them, like, Shaner wants Dino Boy, like, give him Dino Boy. Okay, like, good. Okay. So we found a natural way for Dino Boy to fit in. I drew a few tiny pages in there of the villain base, the fear agents from Birdman. I thought, like, oh, no one else is going to care about drawing this. This will be a perfect place for me to do it. And, you know, and it's like, so I got to do a few in there. I meant to do more art if I could have. And Randall drew several chapters of it. Everything. Steve Rude's in there. It's you know, it turned out so nicely. I wish Shaner could have done more because he was originally part of the whole plan,
right?
And everything. But the important thing, I firmly believe that it's all about landing the plane. And if you deliver on an ending, you know, people
Yeah.
will
And
root for you and everything. And that's what I said to Evan. It's like, look, it's like, take more time off. I'll go ahead and write the last couple or whatever. As long as you come in and stick the landing with the ending, it's going to be great. And it'll fit the story, you know, and everything. And I thought it did.
I thought it did too. I think that the way that you ended the first 12 issues like was so you really did stick the landing, and because you did, what you got after that was because of that. Like, I mean, it's just, the
See,
fact
the
that you can do
problem
some more things before they pull the plug out from under it.
Right.
the problem with the Hanna-Barbera DC books for me is that it reinforced my overwhelming sense of cynicism, because the project started off with like, oh, this isn't going to work. How could this work? And it ended up with the people who manage the property saying, oh, this is terrible.
Yeah.
No, it's great. What's wrong with you? Well, I had my run-ins with those licensing people in particular over our Bugs Bunny project from 30 years ago, Joey Cavallari and me.
Oh,
and,
yeah. Joey's great.
It was just, there was one before it that never happened.
Oh.
And that one would have been phenomenal, but they didn't get it. The woman who was head of, I guess it was the Looney Tunes division of licensing, flew out to New York to tell me there, and I swear I have witnesses, that Looney Tunes is not about satire.
Oh, really?
And my response was, this is why I have witnesses.
Your monocle fell out of your eye.
Have you ever seen any of the Looney Tunes? Have you seen any of these cartoons? Do you know what satire is? And then I pulled the plug on the project because they hated it.
It was just going to be a constant brawl that you would have had ulcers over.
They killed it in spirit before I killed it in reality.
Yeah, yes.
I just, pulled the plug.
Yeah, you did the mercy killing.
That's right. That's right. And it's a shame because, we had great people lined up to do it. And, they want money and they also want to do their creative thing. And unfortunately, they knew it was canceled before they heard the story about that meeting. So they were all upset, and they should be all upset. Absolutely. That's why you hire them in the first place, because they care that much.
You're always going to get the comics people. It's not like they didn't watch all these cartoons. And I see this happen all the time with licensing stuff. Actually, the first time I ever got to work on Johnny Quest, when I was just fresh out of school and was starting to just get a little job here and there, Dark Horse called me because they were going to do a Johnny Quest comic, but it was tying into the cartoon they were doing in the 90s. And I didn't watch that. I didn't know what that was. But they wanted to do some like these little interstitial kind of, not ads, but just little bits that would turn up in the various Dark Horse books to kind of prep everybody for it. And I was so psyched. I was like, oh man, Johnny Quest, Doug Wildey. And I'd been lucky enough back through Bohampton. I got to meet Doug Wildey and got on good terms with him. And I'd call him up, bug him on the phone all the time and everything. He was such a great guy. And so anyway, I turned in all my first few pages, and then the people over at Hanna-Barbera were like, oh no, this looks like Classic Quest. This isn't what we're doing. And I'm like, what? And it's like, we're doing something. Yeah. I feel I'm so glad I didn't have to hear them directly. Phil Amara, the editor, had to hear it. And then they were saying like, no, we're doing edgy, Johnny. I went, they killed people on the old show. Like, you're not doing that just because someone's putting on a VR helmet and having pretend adventures. It's like race is machine gunning guys out of the sky and fighting a pterodactyl. And that quickly turned into a nightmare that ended up with me just drawing some comics that appeared in General Mills cereal boxes. And it was just such a huge disappointment. It was like, oh, here's my dream job. And then it turned into this grueling nightmare where I had to keep redrawing things until finally I was just tracing the model sheets and turning it in defeatedly. And probably a good lesson for me. But made it all the more worth it when years later end up doing Future Quest and get to have Johnny and Haji and everything the way I wanted, and got to do things like, like ignore their model sheets where they had Haji with the last name. I'm like, no, Haji's last name is Quest. He is adopted. He is like, why would Dr. Quest not give him his own name? It's like they're a family. He's not some friend who tags along and everything. And I wanted to really treat Johnny and Haji like real brothers and, stuff like that.
That was one of the best parts. That was so good. The way that,
That's right.
The way that I love Future Quest is one of my favorite comics of all time. And I think because it's something that came from something else and was transformed into this cohesive, gorgeously drawn, well-connected story. It means because I grew up watching all of these characters separately, and the fact of you putting them together was everything. It was awesome.
And Mytor. We got Mytor.
Yeah, Mytor was in it.
Yeah, Lieber and I got to do a Mytor special too after that. That was fun.
Yeah, we had
Adam Strange.
Frankie, Frankenstein Jr. and
yeah.
It was awesome. I wanted to transfer. Oh, that's one thing we've been talking about. Flash Gordon, and I haven't had a chance because Mike was kind of off the last month before in our last shows. I did get a chance to talk to Dan Jurgens about Flash Gordon.
Oh, cool.
Because this has been an ongoing story, Jeff. I'm bringing you up to speed. That Mike and I have talked about this story for a long time. Like we went a long time where he wouldn't tell me the story. Like I'm like I loved Dan and Mike was the editor at the time. I loved that Flash Gordon story. It was one of the things I found so interesting in I was a teenager at the time, and loved it. And he's like, it was horrible. It was such a terrible thing. So I did talk to Dan about it. And his thing was, you really saved him from having to deal with the shit that you dealt with. And that was his. And so it's funny. I said, well, he says wonderful things about your work on it. So the fact that you guys, dealt with that the same way, because apparently King Features is not great to deal with sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And it's corporate history because I was working with King Features people like 2 generations before you were.
Right.
But since I went through 3 of their art directors doing Flash Gordon, I saw how that corporate history passed down from one person to another, and I saw it all happen within a course of a few months.
Mm-hmm.
It was the worst bureaucracy I'd ever seen, full of the lamest people. If they weren't in one of the most beautiful, at the time, buildings in Manhattan, since ruined, still there, I might have blown it up.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you appreciate that New York architecture enough. It's so one of my favorite things, the things that endears me to any editor, is when they will run interference for me. And more importantly, not let me know what people are saying. I love that. Like I've found out later, like, oh yeah, they wanted to fire you and they hated everything you were doing, but I just kept talking about it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, thank you, because that would have occupied my brain and I wouldn't have been doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Right. I would have been worrying. The worst thing you can ever do is try to second guess what people want. Once you go down that path, you're going to just make crap. You're not going to do anything good.
Absolutely. I actually like some of those fights. I mean, the King thing was just terrible on every level, and I had one or two others.
You couldn't even enjoy the sparring.
That's right. But when I was offered the job to return to DC after First Comics, I knew how bureaucratic DC was, and I knew that DC was more bureaucratic than when I had worked there the first time, because it was part of a much bigger company by that point, and bigger and bigger. And I knew it wasn't going to get better, but I was promised a certain amount of space. And I said, okay, that's cool. Let's see how long that will last. And the second time around, I was there for 7 years, and it lasted for 6 of them.
Uh-huh.
So I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. But there are people that I got into blood feuds with in corporate in order to produce comic books that won them awards and made them money. Okay.
Yeah, like we don't, like
right.
like,
Right.
I think you touched on something earlier that you were talking about. The publisher should, in theory, be marketing these things and should be selling these things. I do feel like it's not so much my responsibility to sell the comics.
Sure.
Like, it's kind of enough work just to make a good comic.
Right.
It's like, in theory, you guys are supposed to have a sales force and they should be out selling these things. It's like, and they always come in like they're going to do something new and different. And then they end up like finding out how things typically work. And they go do the exact same things everybody you ever saw before was doing. And you're like, I always think one day somebody's going to come in truly open-minded and think, I think I'll go find some new customers. And then whoever that company is, they're really going to benefit from this. But it's not an easy job. I totally feel for people, but also don't blame me.
Yeah, right. It helps if you know how to be a prick and you know how to turn it off. Tom Smothers, who died a couple weeks ago.
Rest his soul.
I had the honor of working with him.
Really?
When I was 19 during the conspiracy trial. And
what did he have to do with the conspiracy trial? Go ahead.
That's a whole nother.
Listen, we had a conversation about
Did you know
Collins.
Steve Martin too, Mike?
Yeah.
No, I don't think I ever met him. I don't think so. Anyway, Tommy said something that I've lived with every minute of my professional life ever since. He said, most of these people, we were talking about CBS who had just fired him. Most of these people, he said, are good people one-on-one. But the more of them you put together around a table, the worse things get, because everybody's protecting their own ass.
Right.
And they're protecting their own phony baloney jobs. And I don't know why they bother, Tommy said, because in 2 years they're going to be somewhere else doing the exact same thing, but for more money. And I had to realize that, yes, some of these people that you're in these blood feuds with, when you're not on the clock, they're okay people.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't necessarily mean I can stomach them. But in some cases I could.
That's great advice.
It was brilliant.
When people were putting up,
and the man knew what he was talking about.
He did. He knew of which he spoke.
Right.
Man, he did the best Carson impersonation of anybody I've ever seen.
I think that's true. Absolutely.
I hadn't seen that, and I don't know if I ever saw it before, but I definitely saw it recently. Somebody had posted him showing up on the Carson show as Carson.
Yeah. It's on YouTube.
Even before he doesn't even say anything, and he's nailing it. It's hilarious. God,
he was the fastest, smartest person, one of the smartest people I ever met, and he could do it like that. Just get from A to B, and I'm not even talking about when he was in character.
Yeah.
It's just, you're sitting around somebody's dining room table and you're talking.
Mm-hmm.
He's brilliant. And you're wishing that you were recording all of this, that we had a drone camera there or something. God, I wish that was true. That would have been great.
Yeah, the only time you get it is like when he briefly pops into John and Yoko's bed in the Love In or whatever. Like what's Tommy Smothers doing in here?
Yeah, but then Al Cap showed up and ruined the
whole thing. Yeah, that's what he does. That's what Al Cap does.
Well, that's what he. All right, one more story, and I have said it here before, but
this is the Al Cap story.
I'm sorry.
Is this an El Cap story?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had you know the story. I had a party here in like 1988 here in Norwalk, and we invited a lot of the old timers because they were still alive in 1988, and I'm in Fairfield County, which is cartoonist.
Oh
capital.
yeah, you're in the Haven.
So we, all these old guys, most of whom I knew, but a few I met, and all the young guys, like John Byrne, who lived a couple miles away, and folks like that. And us younger folk, we were in our mid to late 30s, we're just sitting there like listening to these guys the whole time. And these old guys got into a discussion about who was the bigger asshole, Bob Kane or Al Cap.
Wow, that could have gone on all night.
It could have, and nobody could agree. None of these old timers. Not Cap was from Connecticut, so a lot of them knew him. Kane was from Mars, and he should have stayed there. But Chad Grothkopf, who is the guy who created Hoppy the Marvel Bunny, and he did the Howdy Doody newspaper strip. But before that, he was an assistant to Joe Shuster in the 30s. And did Sandman. He was the guy, not Simon and Kirby, who put Sandman in a costume, in a superhero costume.
Oh, okay.
Great guy. He just mumbles. He goes, "I can tell you who's the bigger asshole." And everybody went quiet. And everybody says, "It was Al Cap, because Bob Kane didn't rape anybody."
Oh, God.
And everybody just sort of nodded and says, "Yeah, you're right. That's how you parse that one out." Yep.
Yeah.
And then Chad.
That's a real bring the room down moment there.
Oh no, because he topped it off. He knew how to finish. His finish was that we know of.
What?
Bob Kane didn't rape anybody. Pause. That we know of.
Yeah. Well, Julie Newmar had stories of like Cap, like trying to literally doing the chase around the desk sort of thing.
Oh yeah.
On the little Abner, play and the musical and everything.
Yeah, on Broadway.
And of course, it's like Julie Newmar is like as tall as me, like at that point with a dancer's legs and strength, she could have kicked him apart. I mean, it's like he's lucky he didn't lay a hand on her, because, as she said, like he had a wood leg. It wasn't like he was going to catch me, but
that's true though.
It is true. It is true. No, don't mean to be ableist here, but it's like that's what Julie Newmar said. I'm throwing it all off on her. Funny Julie Newmar bit to get us out of the uncomfortable rape.
There we go. Thank you. Let's go.
When I started working on the Batman 66 comic, and did it with my friend Jonathan Case. That made a nice big splash when it came out, because it's the first time you finally got to actually do these characters that it like this, because all the rights had been split up among Dozier's company and Fox Greenway, all that sort of thing. And I don't know who the executive was who worked really hard to get it all together. But obviously, the real thing they wanted was to make a DVD set, which I then had to bug everybody to send me a copy of. But it's like, come on, everybody! Like, as far as I was clear on, like, part of doing the comics actually helped you get this together. And like, after we had done the first story, Julie Newmar got a hold of Jonathan's email, and I love this because this is such a perfect character moment for somebody, and sent him all her favorite pictures of herself. So, like, Jonathan got this email just full of like classic Julie Newmar, and I was like, God, I love that. Like, of course she would do that.
Yeah, that's great.
Oh yeah.
Okay, let's read that out loud.
Well, okay. Well, Haspiel, he fits in here too, because at his request, I put his godmother in there.
Yeah.
Like, if you remember the Ma Parker villain,
right.
It's your takeaways, Ma Parker,
which is Dean's godmother.
Yeah,
of course it is.
Yeah, of course. Taught him how to swim, I believe.
Exactly.
Possibly, as we saw her do in the Poseidon adventure.
That's one of those things that when you meet Dean, he'll throw that out pretty early on somewhere.
He's got all these weird connections to old Hollywood and everything,
and then always, you just kind of have to like take that in and let that sit in the back of your head, and then like 6 months later, the next time you're like, what the heck? How did that happen?
Yeah.
But yeah,
Dean's fascinating.
He's I assume you've had him on like to talk about when he was working for Walton Howard, right?
Sure. We've had Dean on.
You know, when he was working,
Dean is. You know, it's funny.
For Howard, I was the editor. That was American Flag.
Oh yeah, that's right. It's it's first. I forgot. Only briefly
that's
mentioned.
That's where I first met Dean. I think he was about like 7 or something.
He's just crawling around in a diaper.
Just crawling around.
he's already got his shirt off, like he'll be doing when he's an adult for a long time.
I was very upset about his Prince.
Oh man, I wish we could just.
Smashed.
Too bad we can't just grab people inject like 2 minutes of Howard telling some stories and Walt and everything. But I assume as StreamYard gets more versatile, maybe we'll be able to do stuff like that.
We can do things like that. We can work on some of those things. Yeah, but Dean's great. Dean, interestingly, and it's not intentionally, but I've interviewed Dean more than I've interviewed anybody else other than Mike. Yep. So it's very interesting.
He's always good. He's not gonna let you fall asleep. He'll tell you something good.
He is. He's
how true it is.
He watches us, and I love it. So I appreciate that. So thank you for watching.
And also, as a creator, as a cartoonist, every project he does is like the next step to a place you don't know where you're going.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a different trip. It's the same guy doing his stuff, but it's different. And it's just that every project is fascinating.
That's what I get excited about when I'm reading people like him. I love when I start reading a story and I have no idea where this is going. You know, like, oh, I'm being surprised. Because as you know, having worked in comics so much, it's in just stories, period. You probably have a hard time watching movies because immediately you start realizing what they're doing and how they're manipulating you and blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And it really takes you out of it when you can see all the wire work and everything. And it's like, it's really nice when I am caught off guard by a comic and I am just like, I have no idea where this is going. But it is going somewhere. They're not just like trying to throw me by putting up random imagery or whatever. It's different. And that's just super refreshing. I love when people do that.
I agree 100% because we earn our cynicism, you know, because we know the rules, we know the process. So we know the storytelling techniques. We're terrible people to go to a movie with.
Mhm.
were terrible. You know, you got to learn to shut the hell up because you're ruining it for everybody else. And quite frankly, nobody forced you to go to the damn movie in the first place. So
You chose to be there.
When I'm amazed by something, that's a wonderful feeling. And even when I'm not, being paid to do it, it's even better.
No, and I'm glad that now we're kind of in a golden age of really nice collections. Like, Dean Mulaney's doing all the Terry and the Pirate stuff and everything. And like, and Fantagraphics put out those Popeye volumes.
Yep.
And like,
there's a Farford and the Gray Mouser collection coming out tomorrow.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I hope people get into this because they'll find out the thing that like things don't necessarily progress and get better or whatever. There's some things that simply can't be topped. In my mind, Elsie Segar was like this one of a kind creator, and you can read his stuff now. And I can see this because my son will read the volumes and we'll just be laughing our heads off at stuff that he did in the 30s or whatever. And it's timeless. It's just super funny.
Absolutely. It's brilliant. Elsie Segar's is maybe at the top of my list.
Yeah. He's easily one of the top cartoonists ever.
And if not him, then Milton Caniff, and God bless Dean and his crew for doing all that stuff. That is wonderful. I recommend, if you haven't done it, you go to Chester, Illinois, to the Popeye Park, because that's where Elsie Segar was from. They've named streets after him and stuff. And there are statues in this park of each of his main characters.
Awesome.
You can see it online, but there's not a lot.
I go there now.
There's not a well. It's like the Chester, Illinois website. There's not a lot of else. There's not a lot of other things going on in Chester,
right?
I mean, like you can drive down to East St. Louis and see if you get shot, but that's about it. That's about it. But if you're a real fan, it's a pilgrimage.
I am a real fan, by God. I would totally do that.
Yeah, I'll meet you there.
Before
we run out of time, Jeff, what else you have going on? The Silent Night thing just was a 1 month.
Silent Night came out. Marvel just Jesus, this thing's heavy. They collected the entire Thunderbolts run that I wrote with Kev Walker and Declan Shalvey. And I foolishly got some extras of those, and it's like, God, even if I mailed these,
on a plane,
it cost a fortune. What? Huh?
You're gonna put them on a plane, take them with you?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. It's like I might take them to Seattle. I may try to do that thing where I let people know, like, okay, I'll draw in this and sell it to you, but you got to promise you're going to buy this if I lug this thing and hurt my back coming to that show. I'm currently working on to switch more back into the cartoony stuff, like we were talking about Looney Tunes. I'm working on Negaduck at Dynamite, which is Darkwing Duck's evil opposite, who looks just like him but with the yellow coat, and that's kind of fun. That's I also wanted to do something. I love to do something that's pure kid friendly once in a while, so that, like at Halloween, I like to hand out comics with candy.
Nice.
Like,
yeah, me too.
It always goes over really well. Like the kid, you'd think you'd be in it and the kids would like walk by them, but they're always happy to get the books. And it's like, you can't tell me kids don't still like comics. That's ridiculous. Like, I see them, like, of course I'm giving them away, but they're still happy to get them. And because they're going to be sugared up while they read them, it'll be a better experience for everybody.
I do that too. I go to my shop on after Free Comic Book Day, and I'm like, you guys got extras leftovers, because I give them out for Halloween.
Oh, bless you. That's the perfect thing to do.
Yeah.
Really, everybody ought to do it, because one, it's like, I don't know, it slows them down. It reminds them of other stuff. To me, Halloween's my favorite. It's my favorite holiday. I mean, I know I just wrote a Christmas event, but really, I get most excited about Halloween. I always work on all this stuff, props and stuff, and try to set up fun things to show kids and everything like that. But for the DC Silent Night thing, I did have to do that weird thing where I'm thinking about Christmas in May. You know, I'm like Dennis the Menace, Christmas all year round. You know, I'm trying to think about Christmas and get in the mood for it way back then, so that I could write a proper Christmas story.
I can just imagine
Cool.
what the guys used to go through over at Archie, and it's worse today actually because they do tons and tons and tons of Christmas product.
They really do. They milk it.
Oh yeah,
They do one every week. You know,
and they did it before I was born, and I'm older than the two of you together, I think.
Yeah.
So thanks, but
not really.
They've been doing that forever. I remember seeing Archie's Christmas stocking at the Woolworths when I was 5. And they've been doing this forever, and now they have like 100 different Christmas titles. And I know that, at some point in May,
buying these things, yeah,
and sometime in May, Dan Parents is sitting there going like, "Oh God, not another Santa Claus,"
Dan's like, well, time to get to work. I don't know how he even goes to shows as much as he does. I'm like, dude, you put out 2 books a month. What?
He's doing a show in Fairbanks, Alaska in February.
Yeah.
I've been to Fairbanks, but it was in.
He loves that show.
Not in February.
I told him I was jealous.
He loves that show. I went out to dinner with him when we were in Columbus, and he's amazing. He's been doing this for so long, and he just keeps doing it, and he just enjoys it. He enjoys the shows he does because he gets to meet people and do things. I keep bugging him for some more Kitty, which he's going to try and hopefully work on. But
he's a force of nature. He and I did the we did the Batman 66 Archie crossover, and then we did, and as far as I knew, he drew most of it too. Like we did a Flash Gordon one. So so Archie meets Flash Gordon. I don't think they ever put it out, or somebody mentioned to me like, oh yeah, they're finally going to put that out, and I'm like, do they still have the license? Because I don't know if Dynamite doesn't do it anymore.
Dynamite doesn't have the license. That's who we did it. Mad Cave has the license.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately, the real license is always going to be with King Features. So, I guess they have to get them to sign off on it. And it's like, oh, whatever. Maybe they'll go for it. I hate to do work that no one sees, but at least we got paid. So,
Sure.
Well, I'm glad to see Dan doing all of these conventions and doing these wonderful sketch covers and stuff, because he's getting a lot of attention for it, and he deserves every minute.
He does. No one deserves it more. He's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely.
All right. Well,
okay.
Thank you, everybody, for
now that we've talked about every comic ever published.
Wait, hold on. Before I need everybody to see my shirt. See, it says "Should have read more comics."
No, you've been saying that on this show here forever.
I'm just saying. I voiced this shirt into existence. We had Becky Cloonan on at the end in October, I think, and I was telling her how one of my things that I say to people is read more comics. They're good for you. And now all of a sudden there's this shirt that's Becky Cloonan.
Becky did that?
Yeah.
That's great.
So
it is great.
Like she's like, oh, that's a great idea. I'm like, yeah, well, I expect to see a shirt with, a skeleton on it saying read more comics, and there you go.
She always comes through. She's great.
She does.
That's wonderful.
So all right. Thank you everybody for watching. I'm sorry.
I was saying to Jeff, it was wonderful talking with you.
Absolutely.
Likewise.
And I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you guys for having me on. This is exactly the kind of stuff I love to talk about. and we did a bunch of deep dives in a short amount of time. And that's, man, I live for this stuff. This is great.
Absolutely great. Thank you so much for being here. We'll look out for you. We'll get you on again. As we do this, folks, we may be on next week, but please stay tuned. Sign up on the for the newsletter, which is in the comments section. That way you'll get to know what's going to happen next week. Again, thanks everybody for being here, and we will see you next time.
All right. Thanks, folks. See you soon.
This has been a production of the Pop Culture Squad Network. PopCultureSquad.com. How do you nerd?